Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Walters Wandering Travel Podcast. My name is Scott Walters, and I'm here today with a very special guest. We're going to talk about something we probably would not have talked about 3 years ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, to any length, and that is travel insurance and the necessity and need for travel insurance. So, here is my special that goes along with this podcast. If you purchase a travel insurance policy through me for your upcoming trip, I will give you a $25 travel credit that you can use for future travel on a trip you take later on. So that's simple enough. And we bring on our guest. His name is Jeremy Pieroth. He's from Generali Insurance. They do travel insurance. They do other insurance, I believe, as well. But we're talking about the travel side of things because that's what we're here for on the Walters Wandering Travel Podcast. Jeremy, hello, and how are you today?
Doing good. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm better than the weather, and we just got rid of some biblical proportion rains yesterday. I had Noah next door, my next door neighbor. He was hammering, but he stopped, so it's all good. We're all good.
I think that
So
was that atmospheric rain or whatever they were saying, the bomb monsoon.
yes,
Or
the
whatever
bomb
words they
Genesis,
were
the bomb
coming up with.
cyclones. They like to the hype is incredible these days on that, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Generali Insurance, talk to us about the company, its background, and about some of the products that are available to travelers.
Okay. Yeah, so Generali Global Assistance has been around since the 1830s. Started out as an assistance provider. We're That's the big thing Generali prides itself on, is the assistance service side of the business. So then there's CSA travel protection. If you see CSA Generali, it's all us. So CSA started out as the travel protection line of the business in 1991. About 10 years ago, Generali purchased CSA. So Generali is our parent company, underwriter. So they underwrite all the policies. We handle everything in-house with us, from the assistance to the claims to the customer service. So everything's all us through us when you're purchasing it. You're not going out through anybody else. But we do also have some additional lines, such as like identity theft is something that we do offer as standalone products. If you're going on, even besides just the regular travel agent business, we have our vacation rental side of the business. So people might have come across us through that side. So we do a lot when it comes to the travel industry.
Well, that's very interesting. And that's a very long history too. So I
Yes.
think there's something to be said about that. So I appreciate that. Now let's talk about some of the types of travel insurance travelers need to buy. But before we actually get to that, I think we need to discuss some of the misconceptions out there that people might have about travel insurance. I think the number one misconception is people sometimes say to me, I don't need travel insurance. It's already covered under my own other insurance plan. Can you address that particular conundrum for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to your own medical insurance, that's typically what people are referring to. That medical insurance is going to cover me if I get sick or injured on their trip. Sometimes that's not always the case, depending on the plan. We know Medicare being something that if you're traveling outside the US, there's no coverage for. Even if you have a Blue Cross, Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Kaiser, whoever that provider is, some of those providers don't provide benefits outside the US, or maybe they provide a lot lower benefits than what you normally would. So there's more out-of-pocket expense, more out-of-pocket risk that you have, especially if you're traveling internationally. And then even domestically, there's some people that they have co-pays, deductibles, different things like that they're going to have out-of-pocket expenses. Even if they're traveling here and something happens, they're going to have those expenses. They put it through their medical, whereas with us, we're covering those out-of-pocket expenses for you as long as it's due to a covered event.
We understand that. We'll get to what's the covered event and what's not in a minute.
Yes.
The next misconception is, I don't need travel insurance. My credit card offers me protection.
Yes. So with the credit card, the credit cards, they're in the business of making money off of you spending your money. They make money off of you having your money there and collecting that interest off you if you're not paying your card off at the statement date. That's where they're making their money. So the travel insurance is a good ad to get you to spend some more of your money. But those limits, you're going to have to really see what's covered, what's not covered. A lot of the medical and the evacuation limits are lower limits in their combined limit. So if you have somebody that needs to get evacuated off of a cruise ship, that'll pretty much use that whole limit up, plus all the other hospitalization type stuff that goes in there. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Even if you have to stay longer, a lot of those prepaid, they're only going to cover prepaid expenses. So if someone gets hurt, needs to stay longer and they have additional expenses, COVID being one of them. There's times that there's no coverage for things like that if you're just going through your credit card.
So, all right, you brought up the word COVID. I guess we need to talk about that because that's what everyone's talking about. I know that we are traveling now, and we know that COVID does sort of hang over us, and we know that different types of travel have different types of protocols, and we understand that, and we either choose to travel or we choose not to. So I fully understand. I'm fully aware from my vantage point. I have traveled. I traveled last year before there was any vaccine to Mexico. I actually felt safer there than going to my Costco that's a mile down the road from where I live. True story. From the moment I got into the town car to take me to the airport to the moment I arrived back in my house, I felt safe and secure. Protocols were being followed. It was a glorious week of learning new stuff for me. My family we're planning 2 cruises coming up. We're going the day after Christmas, and we're going again in February on 2 different cruise lines. And we understand that each cruise line has their own protocols and all. And we'll make our way through, and we'll do the right thing, and we'll get it done, and we'll still have a great time. So when it comes to COVID and travel insurance, I guess we need to know what's covered, what's not covered. How do we know it's covered, and what's the difference from your company Generali versus other companies out there?
Yeah, with COVID, we provide coverage for COVID the same as any other sickness, illness would be from a coverage perspective. So your clients, they need to have the policy in effect. So policy does need to be in effect. And then as long as they go take a test, get that positive COVID test, if that's a reason for cancellation, coverage is available for something like that. Now, if someone's traveling, they're traveling international, they need to take that COVID test 72 hours before they arrive back home. They take that test, they get a positive. Then there's coverage for interruption, delay, medical, evacuation if they need it as well, is all covered while they're needing to be quarantined and get back here to the US. So from a coverage perspective, we treat it the same as if somebody got the flu or bronchitis or any kind of a sickness. Coverage perspective, it's held the same way. But there's no coverage for fear of travel. I'm afraid I'm going to go and catch COVID. That's not covered. Governmental bans, restrictions, there's no coverage for that as well. So if there's anything, especially with the vaccinations now, that if a specific country requires a vaccination, you have somebody who's not vaccinated, and that's the reason that they're canceling because they don't meet those requirements, something like that's not covered. Another thing that we've been getting a lot more is vaccination questions. To us, if you catch COVID, whether you're vaccinated or not, it doesn't matter from a coverage perspective. We look at it as long as your policy is in effect and you have that positive test that's preventing you from traveling, that's why you're canceling. That's all we're looking at. We're not looking into vaccinated versus unvaccinated. We don't get into that. It's just if that's part of the requirements to get into a certain country, there's no coverage for something like that.
So basically what you're saying then is if you're not vaccinated and are going somewhere and all of a sudden even if it's after you've booked a trip and bought the insurance, if there's a change and they say that perhaps you need a vaccination in order to come here or come on our cruise ship or whatever, and you don't do it, then if you cancel, it's tough luck, for lack of a better terminology.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Since it does fall under those requirements needed for entry, I mean, it is something. If you have somebody, we could always work with them with getting their premiums refunded back to them. But just if they're looking to cancel and they're out of money because of that, just unfortunately something like that's not covered. It's similar to even before COVID. I know there were certain countries that did require certain vaccines to get into them to begin with. So similar to that, and similar to like, passports. Say you forget your passport. Fortunately, something like that's not covered because you're not meeting the requirements for entry in the country.
Yeah, you better have that passport. You better have the visas for those countries ready to go.
Exactly.
Now, we have there's different levels of coverage. And I think it's important for people to know what some of the dollar amounts are as far as what you can get reimbursed. And also, let's walk through the whole process. Say something happens. Say I break a leg on my cruise, right? And I'm in Nassau and I break a leg on my cruise, okay? And I have to go to the Nassau General Hospital to get a cast on, and I miss the boat because, well, it takes a while to get through the emergency room and all. And, I have to fly back to New York because I broke my leg. How does that all work? How does it work as far as the claim process goes? I think it's important for people to understand exactly what's going to be paid out of pocket, what the reimbursement is, what the timeframes are, and all of that.
Yeah, so if anything that does happen, of course, as long as it's a covered event, I can't, make that determination. All that determination's made by claims based on the information that is submitted to claims. But in a situation like that, it happens, client goes to the hospital, they can always call us and say, if they're in a certain city and say, hey, I broke my leg, can you what's a hospital in the area? I need to get a cast on there. We can give them facilities in the area that they can go to. They go to that facility and, they get that cast put on, get their discharge paperwork. They will go ahead and put it through their medical, or they can pay it on the front end. But if it's something that's, they can't cover, it's too expensive, whatever it may be, they can always call us. We can handle that payment on the front end and deal with everything with the claim. But your client, they go ahead, they put it through their medical, they pay for it, they get discharged. Now they go ahead and submit a claim. Our claim forms are on csaclaims.com. So claims with the S. You can view all the claims forms on that website, download them, submit the claim. Claim goes over to our claims department. Clients get an email that says who their claim rep is, when it is assigned. And then if there's any information that's a back and forth, maybe there's items that are not clear, we need additional information, the claim rep will request that. If there's nothing additional and we have everything, then they'll get that determination approved or denied. And even if it is denied, say it's something, denied because we're missing some kind of a paperwork, we can always reopen a claim as well and say, hey, well, no, I do have this paperwork, I just forgot to submit it, or whatever it may be. Is they can do that, and then the claims handled from there. I mean, we do on average pay out the highest claims in the industry, just compared to our competitors. We try to turn around our claims as quick as possible. We do have an average turnaround time of 18 days. So it does depend. If it is something that's, very cut and dry, that it was a travel delay, here's all your receipts, here's the information, submit it to us. I've heard of claims that have been turned around within the week. So as long as we have all that information, we're not going to hold your client's money hostage. We're going to get it paid out and get it paid to them.
Well, that actually sounds encouraging in a way. Obviously, it's a matter of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and have all of your evidence. Having had a claim against a certain theme park in Florida where I broke my forearm, I can tell you the process there was much more lengthy and lugubrious than working through Generali. So I can tell you that right off the bat. Now, what about a frequent traveler? Someone who goes on, I guess what I want to say is, not only are there policies for individual trips, but there are policies that are more of an annualized in nature. So,
we don't have anything that's an annual plan that's a direct to consumer or any kind of consumer plans that are annual. The only thing is we have an agent plan, like for yourself. that we have for our partners as an annual plan, but nothing that's consumer based.
So consumers would pay based on each trip.
Correct.
And the basic cost is, as I price these things out, it looks like the basic cost for travel insurance tends to run about 8% more or less of the trip cost.
Yeah, that's a good ballpark.
So for that amount of money, you get peace of mind, especially if you fall into some of those categories we discussed earlier about someone who's maybe a little bit older, who's on a Medicare but still travels, people who are going out of the country, specifically more than in the country, because there are other costs and other things we have to worry about. And also when it comes to, any kind of trip that's, more lengthy in nature. If you're going on a 3-day weekend somewhere, maybe travel insurance might be a bit frivolous. It's still perhaps necessary because you might have a condition that would warrant it, but if you're going on a 10-day holiday somewhere, it might be more worthwhile. Now, when it comes to the premiums and paying them, I guess what I want to get to is, when can you purchase the travel insurance and have it be in effect for your trip?
So the insurance, it can be purchased up until the day before departure. So you can always purchase it up until the day before departure. But if you are looking for things such as coverage for pre-existing conditions, that does need to be purchased prior to or within 24 hours of final payment. As long as all the travelers are medically able to travel, and then 100% of the prepaid non-refundable trip costs are covered. As long as those requirements are met within final payment, you'll have the coverage for the pre-existing conditions. Those are just the big ones from a time frame wise. You can always purchase it right around deposit, before deposit. If you're making deposits, can purchase for that deposit and then increase each time just by final payment. Need to have that full 100% of those trip costs covered to receive that pre-ex coverage. But if you don't care about the pre-existing condition coverage, it can be purchased up until the day before departure. Another thing, just with the COVID, to kind of touch on that a little bit, if there is somebody that's waiting, if you go the same day, if you purchase your policy in the same day, go take your COVID test and you get a positive, something like that would be denied, just because the policy always goes in effect the day after purchase. So if you're waiting until that last minute, just in case, is purchase it at least a day before taking that COVID test, just in case a positive comes back.
It sounds like some of my Groupon offers where I have to wait 24 hours before I use them. So
Right.
it's not much different than that. And it sort of makes sense only because there's paperwork that has to be done on your end and all of that in order for it to be processed and fully made into a thing. It's just like, it's not like, you're going to buy, a hot dog from the hot dog vendor. It's not that kind of transaction.
Yes.
So I guess what I want to ask now is, what do you see as the trends in travel insurance coming up for 2022? What would you be telling people as far as what to look for, if there's going to be any changes in how travel insurance is dealt with and all of that?
I mean, I guess some of the trends we've been seeing in the industry is we've been seeing more, domestic travel versus the international travel. The international travel is starting to pick back up a little bit more, I think, as people are, I guess, more used to COVID and the restrictions and what they need to do to travel. They maybe feel a little more comfortable and not sure, but we are starting to see some of that pick up. I mean, from us, from a coverage perspective, there really isn't much change from pre-COVID to post-COVID, so to say. We hadn't had any updates. I know our actuarial team is looking into some updates or modifications to our policies, but there's nothing that's imminent with that, because there's a lot of back and forth with the Department of Insurance to make changes. So just as of right now, with us, there's not much updates. Just with the COVID. I mean, the COVID, just having the coverage for it as sickness, that's just a new thing. But other than that, everything's kind of status quo for us, so to say.
So before we leave, do you have any amusing or funny stories of a insurance claim that someone has made that you couldn't help but laugh at because it was one of those things that was, oh my gosh, that is actually funny that someone encountered on a vacation?
Um, let's see. Let me try to think. I know I don't really see the claims too much, so it's hard to really have some of those stories. I'm trying to think of some of them that I've heard just throughout the years. Um, I'm trying to think. You put me on the spot, and I'm like
I'm
drawing a
sorry, that was
blank
my
on the
gotcha
tick, you know?
question, but I couldn't help but asking. But yeah, if you're not in the claims department, you're not going to get so many of those funny stories, I suppose. But I watch some of these shows like one that I watch and sometimes chuckle at is Sex Sent Me to the ER, and I was hoping that maybe you would have some kind of story like that where something really unusual happened of some poor person while they were on a vacation that otherwise is inexplicable. But if you don't, it's okay. And like I said, I broke my forearm at a very famous theme park in Florida. That's not Universal and not SeaWorld. So I mean, I had my moments dealing with people. I
Yeah.
actually didn't deal with the insurance part, but I dealt with the claims department of said company. And like I said, it was a very long and lugubrious process, but I prevailed in the end because I did my due diligence. As soon as I fell down, I took pictures of where I fell down. I got all my paperwork in a row, and there you go. And I think those are the most important things. When something
Yes.
happens, make sure you document it. So this way, it's easier for the insurance company to be able to handle it and deal with it and give you a thumbs up rather than a thumbs down.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. As much information, documentation you can get during that situation. I know sometimes it's not the first thing on the mind if you fell down and broke your leg, but or whatever it may be. But as much of that supporting information, documentation you could have makes it so much easier for the claim. I mean, I could tell you a crazy kind of situation that happened to myself with a claim that was approved. This was a couple months back. We were flying San Diego to Philly. We have our kids with us. We're checking some of the stuff with the kids, strollers, and we actually didn't do a stroller. My wife's seen people take a wagon before in the airport, like one of those
Oh
Costco
my!
wagons.
Uh-huh.
So she was like, "Yeah, we're fine. We should be able to do it." And we get there, and the airline goes, "Nope, you need to check that, and it's not free because it's not a stroller, so you got to pay for it." So like, okay, that's fine. We'll pay for it. So we go and put one of our bag that we're checking on there on the weight, the scale tells us our weight's over. So we take some items out of that, put it in the other bag. My wife gives her boarding pass, gives her credit card that she has to the airline attendant. Everything's good. Get the tag, get everything back, go get to our destination. Now we have our car seats, we have our luggage. Now we're looking for the bag that has the wagon in it. So we can't find it. Maybe it's oversized. We're talking to them. They look up our last name. They go, "Oh yeah, there's 4 bags. You should have got all 4." But my dad was with us at the time, and he checked the bag. And we're like, "No, his bag has nothing to do with our bag." So it ends up that my wife pulls out the receipt she got from the airline, and she looks at it and goes, "This is probably why." Has somebody else's name that we have no clue
Oh my
who
goodness!
is on the receipt, but the last 4 is her card number. So at least we had, I guess, that proof to say, hey, it's us. Go to the airline asking for it. Long story short, they ended up having that bag follow that guy to where he was going. He ended up going to like Cleveland through Chicago. We got the bag back like 2-3 days later. We had some clothes for our kids in there, so we bought some additional clothes and stuff. And it was just a runaround going through the airline because we'd have to each say, it's under this guy's name, but it's our bag. Here's the situation. Here's what happened. And
Oh
keep
my
that
goodness!
story over and over and over again to the airline until we finally got the bag back. And then, the couple $100 in items we got for the kids, filed a claim, and it was approved. So that was a new situation to me. I mean, luckily the guy had no clue that he had a checked bag under his name because somebody could have went and took this bag because it was
Oh
under
yeah, of course, and he might not even had any checked luggage at all, and he goes off the plane, to O'Hare, off to wherever, and that thing is sitting somewhere in some room unattended. Oh yeah, I get it. I
yeah.
understand.
So
I'm
that,
so
that was a new one for me.
Well, that is a new one. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking some time to be on the podcast and give us the download, the lowdown rather on all things insurance. I think it's really important that we talk about this and have this conversation. And I'm sure that this will be a podcast I'll be sending out to all my prospective clients so they can understand fully the whole deal with insurance. So I want to thank you for being on the podcast with me. And just a reminder, if you do buy an insurance policy uh, for your upcoming trip, I will get you a $25 future travel credit for a future trip that you take with Walters Wandering Travel. So, Jeremy, thank you so much. And I
Thank
thank
you.
everyone for being on board with the Walters Wandering Travel podcast. We'll have another episode soon.